I'm selling the bakery. Those 4 words hung in the air between us, heavy with 30 years of flour-dusted memories and pre-dawn risings. My son James stared at me across our family kitchen table, his coffee cup frozen halfway to his lips. I'd chosen Sunday morning to tell him, the only day the bakery was closed, the only day we ever truly rested. You're... what? His voice came out clipped, stunned. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I placed, my palms flat on the table, steadying myself. I'm selling Bernard's Bakery. The papers are already signed. Without telling me, without even discussing it. The cup clattered against the saucer as he set it down too hard. Coffee sloshed over. The rim, a dark stain spreading across the white tablecloth. Neither of us moved to wipe it up. I'm 65, James. I've been getting up at 3 a.m. for more than 3 decades. My back hurts. My hands hurt. It's time. So you just sold it? Our family business? The place where Dad... He stopped, his voice catching. He didn't need to. Finish. Bernard's Bakery was more than a business. It was the last living piece of my late husband. The legacy he'd built from nothing after we married. The place where James had learned to knead dough as a toddler standing on a milk crate. I got a good offer. Better than good, actually. I twisted the gold wedding band I still wore. With what I already had saved, I'll be comfortable. I won't need to worry about money again. James stood suddenly, the wooden chair scraping against the floor. At 32, he towered over me, his father's height but with my dark eyes. This is unbelievable! You've thrown away our family history for what? An easy retirement? What am I supposed to do now? The question caught me off guard. Do? James, you're an architect with your own firm. You haven't worked in the bakery since college. That's not the point. His voice rose, bouncing off the walls of the kitchen where we'd shared thousands of meals together. The bakery was supposed to be, it was always there. For all of us. I felt a flash of irritation. All of us. While I was up before dawn every day for 30 years, James had built his life away from flour and sugar and butter. He'd gone to university, married Vanessa, a woman who considered manual labor beneath her, and moved into the expensive loft, apartment her parents had helped them buy as a wedding gift. He visited on Sundays, picked up free bread, and reminisced about childhood memories in the bakery. But he'd never once offered to take over. James, the bakery was my life, not yours. You chose a different path. I'm proud of you for that. But don't pretend this was your future. His face flushed, a familiar sign of the temper he'd inherited from his father. So, what's your plan? Sell everything and move to Florida? Join a senior knitting circle? I haven't decided yet. I might travel. A bit, but I'll stay in the city. This is my home. I sipped my coffee, hoping the conversation would settle. Well, at least tell me you got what it's worth, he said, crossing his arms. Those developers have been circling the neighborhood for years. Please tell me you had a lawyer look at the offer. I set my cup down carefully. Victor Ramirez handled everything. The sale price was fair. James's eyebrows shot up. Victor? Mom, he's a neighborhood attorney who handles parking tickets and small claims. This is commercial real estate. Victor has been my friend for 20 years. He wouldn't steer me wrong. I felt defensive now, my voice sharpening. And I'm not a fool, James. I know what my business is worth. How much? He demanded. That's not... How much? I took a deep breath. 1.2 million. His eyes widened for a moment before narrowing. That property, in that location, with the established business, it's worth at least 2 million, probably more. It needed renovations. The equipment is aging, and I didn't want to wait for a better offer. I didn't mention that the buyers had agreed to keep on my staff of 6, some of whom had been with me for over a decade. That had been worth more to me than squeezing out every last dollar. James paced the small kitchen, running his hands through his hair. Another gesture so like his father's it made my chest ache. I can't believe you'd make such a massive decision without talking to me first. I could have helped, brought in the right people. Now it's too late. Yes, it is. I stood up too, gathering our cups. The bakery era of my life is over. James, I've earned this retirement. He turned to me, his face hard. So what now? What will you do with yourself all day? The dismissive tone in his voice stung more than I expected. For years, all he and Vanessa had done was urge me to work less, to take time for myself. Now that I finally had, he acted as if I'd have no purpose without the bakery. I might finally plant that garden I've always wanted. Read books that aren't about bread recipes. Sleep past 3 a.m. Visit my grandchildren more than once a week. I placed the cups in the sink with a gentle clink. Speaking of which, how are Emma and Lucas? He ignored my attempt to change the subject. Vanessa and I were counting on the bakery. Being there for our future, Mom. For the kids' future. I turned back to him, genuinely confused. In what way? You've both been very clear that you didn't want them spending time in a working-class environment. Those were Vanessa's exact words last Christmas. His face flushed again. That's not fair. She just meant, I know exactly what she meant, James. I cut him off, tired of the pretense. You and Vanessa have your own lives, your own careers. You've never wanted the bakery. You've wanted the idea of it, the charming family business you could tell stories about at dinner parties, but not the actual work. That's not true. His voice rose again. I grew up in that bakery. It's part of me. When was the last time you actually worked there? Made a loaf of bread? Served a customer? I crossed my arms, knowing the answer. He faltered. That's not the point. The point is you made this massive decision without me, and now a huge part of our family's legacy is gone. He checked his watch, the expensive Swiss timepiece Vanessa had given him last birthday. I need to go. Vanessa's waiting for me. We have brunch with her partners at the firm. Of course. I nodded, not bothering to hide my disappointment. Even now, he couldn't stay, couldn't really talk this through. Give my love to Emma and Lucas. He gathered his coat from the hook by the door, pausing before he left. We're not done talking about this. You need to reconsider, Mom. There must be a way to cancel the sale. There isn't. The deal is done. I stood firm, though part of me wanted to comfort him, to make this easier. It's time for a new chapter. He shook his head and left, the door closing with more force than necessary. I stood alone in my kitchen, surrounded by the reminders of a life spent feeding others while sometimes forgetting to nourish myself. I didn't hear from James for 3 days. No calls, no texts. It was the longest we'd gone without communication since he'd gone to college. On Thursday afternoon, my cell phone finally lit up with his name. Mom, we need to talk. Can I come over after work? I agreed, though something in his tone made me uneasy. When he arrived at 6:30, he wasn't alone. Vanessa followed him through the door, her camel-colored coat perfectly matched to her leather handbag, her blonde hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. She didn't remove her coat, a sign she didn't plan to stay long. Hello, Ruth, she said, kissing the air beside my cheek. She'd never called me Mom, or even Mrs. Bernard. Always, Ruth, like we were distant acquaintances. Vanessa, what a surprise. Can I get you both something to drink? Coffee? Tea? No, thank you. Vanessa answered for both of them. This is more of a business discussion. I raised an eyebrow. Business? About your living situation, James clarified, looking uncomfortable as he perched on the edge of my sofa. Mom, we've been talking and we think you should consider moving into Oakwood Gardens. The retirement community? I felt my back stiffen. I'm not even 70 yet, James, and I'm perfectly healthy. It's not about your health, Vanessa said, smoothly. It's about practicality. This apartment is too big for one person. The maintenance, the stairs, the cleaning, it's a lot for someone your age to manage. Someone my age, I repeated, not bothering to keep the edge from my voice. I've been managing just fine for the 10 years since your father died, James. Nothing has changed. Everything has changed, Vanessa countered. You don't have the bakery anymore. You don't have a reason to live in this neighborhood. I looked around my apartment, the cozy 2-bedroom where James had grown up, where Bernard and I had built our life together. It wasn't fancy, but it was home. Every scratch on the hardwood floors, every sun-faded patch of wallpaper held memories. This is my home, I said simply. I have no intention of leaving it. James leaned forward, his expression earnest. Mom, we've looked into Oakwood Gardens. It's really nice. Modern apartments, a community center, activities, a swimming pool, and it's safer. No more worrying about break-ins or walking alone at night. I'm not afraid of this neighborhood, I said firmly. I've lived here for 40 years. I know every shopkeeper, every neighbor. But the area is changing, Vanessa said. With all these new developments coming in, property values are skyrocketing. You're sitting on a gold mine with this apartment. If you sold now and moved to Oakwood, you could invest the difference. Combined with the bakery money, you'd be set for life. The real reason for their visit suddenly became clear. This wasn't about my welfare. It was about money. My money. I see, I said quietly. And who would manage these investments for me? James fidgeted. We thought maybe Vanessa's father could help. He's handled our portfolio for years, and his returns are incredible. I'm sure they are. I didn't mention that Harold Whitman had once tried to convince me to sell the bakery to a developer friend of his for half its value. But I'm comfortable with my current financial situation. Are you? Vanessa pressed. Because from what James tells me, you may have significantly undervalued the bakery. That money needs to last the rest of your life, Ruth. Healthcare costs alone could wipe out your savings if you're not careful. I appreciate your concern, I said, struggling to keep my tone even. But my finances are my business. I have no intention of selling my apartment or moving to a retirement community. James sighed heavily. Mom, we're just trying to help. With the bakery gone, what's keeping you here? You could have a fresh start somewhere designed for people in your situation. My situation? I felt heat rising in my face. And what situation? Is that exactly? Retirement, Vanessa said quickly. Senior living. A community of peers. I have a community right here, I countered. My friends, my neighbors, my book club, my volunteer work at the hospital. My whole life is here. James and Vanessa exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. Then James reached for my hand. Mom, there's something else we should discuss. Vanessa, and I have been thinking about buying a bigger place. The loft is getting cramped with the kids growing up, and we'd love to have a yard for them. That sounds wonderful, I said cautiously, not sure where this was heading. The thing is, Vanessa continued, property in the good school districts is so expensive. We've been looking for months and everything is just out of reach. But if you were to sell this apartment and move to Oakwood Gardens, my heart sank as I realized what they were suggesting. You want me to help you buy a house? Not exactly, James said quickly. We just thought that if you were downsizing, anyway, maybe you'd consider helping us upgrade, for the grandkids' sake. I see. I pulled my hand away from his. So you want me to sell my home, move to a retirement facility, and give you the proceeds so you can buy a bigger house in a better neighborhood? That's not how we're thinking about it, Vanessa protested, though her flushed cheeks suggested otherwise. It would be an investment in your family's future, in Emma and Lucas's education and opportunities. I stood up, needing to put physical distance between us. I think you should go now. Mom, please, James started. No. I cut him off, my voice steady but firm. I've listened to what you had to say, and now I need you to listen to me. I worked hard every day of my life to build something meaningful. The bakery was never just about making money. It was about creating something with my own hands, about serving my community. I sold it because I'm tired, not because I wanted to fund your lifestyle upgrade. That's not fair, James protested. We're thinking about the kids. Are you? I challenged. Or are you thinking about keeping up with Vanessa's colleagues and their summer homes and private school tuitions? I turned to my daughter-in-law. There's nothing wrong with wanting nice things, Vanessa. But don't expect me to give up my home so you can have them. Vanessa stood abruptly, her face rigid with anger. I think we're done here. James, let's go. James hesitated, looking between us. Mom, please, we're just trying to help you make the right decision for your future. My future is mine to decide, I said quietly. Just as yours is yours. I respect your choices, James. I need you to respect mine. Even if they're the wrong ones, he challenged, standing to join his wife. Especially then. I walked to the door, holding it open. I love you, James. I love Emma and Lucas. But my home is not for sale. They left without another word, Vanessa stalking ahead while James trailed behind, shoulders slumped. As I closed the door, I leaned against it, suddenly exhausted. The confrontation had drained me, but it had also clarified something. The sale of the bakery wasn't just the end of one chapter. It was forcing the beginning of another. And in this new chapter, I needed to stand my ground. The following week brought another surprise, this one far less pleasant. I received notice that my rent would be increasing by 40% when my lease renewed in 60 days. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I'd lived in the same apartment for nearly 4 decades, with modest annual increases that I'd built into my budget. But this was impossible. I immediately called my landlord, Mr. Petrovich, who'd owned the building since before I moved in. I'm sorry, Ruth, he said, his voice heavy with genuine regret. I sold the building. The new owners are raising all the rents to market rate. Market rate? I echoed. This is a working-class neighborhood, Igor. Nobody here can afford market rate. I know, he sighed. But I'm 78. My wife needs full-time care now. The offer was too good to refuse. I couldn't blame him. Hadn't I just made the same decision with the bakery? Who bought it? I asked. Maybe I can talk to them, work something out. Some investment company. Whitehall Properties, I think. It's all corporate now. They sent a management company to handle everything. I'm sorry, Ruth. You've been a good tenant. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the rent increase notice until the numbers blurred. I could afford it, barely, thanks to the bakery sale. But it would mean dipping into what I'd planned as my retirement savings much sooner than expected. And for what? To stay in an apartment that would likely see another dramatic increase the following year? For the first time, I wondered if James and Vanessa might be right. Maybe holding on to this place was more about stubbornness than practicality. Maybe I was the one refusing to see reason. My phone buzzed with a text from James. Have you reconsidered Oakwood Gardens? We have a brochure we can drop off. My thumbs hovered over the screen. I could tell him about the rent increase, admit that maybe he was right after all. But something stopped me, a mixture of pride and lingering hurt from our last conversation. I put the phone down without responding. I needed time to think, to come up with a plan that was truly mine. The next day, I visited Victor Ramirez at his small law office above the laundromat. The bells jingled as I pushed open the door, and his secretary, Maria, greeted me with a warm smile. Ruth! How lovely to see you. How's retirement treating you? Still feels strange, I admitted. Is Victor available? I need some advice. Minutes. Later, I sat across from Victor, explaining my situation. He listened carefully, his salt and pepper eyebrows drawing together as I mentioned Whitehall Properties. "That name sounds familiar," he said, typing something into his computer. "Ah, yes. They've been buying up buildings all over the neighborhood. Very aggressive tactics from what I've heard. They buy, raise rents, renovate minimally, then flip the buildings for a profit once they've forced out the long-term tenants and replaced them with younger professionals who can pay double." Exactly what I was afraid of. I sighed. "So what are my options, Victor?" He leaned back in his chair, thinking. "Well, you could contest the increase, but truthfully, there's not much legal ground to stand on in this state. Rent control doesn't apply to your building. You could try negotiating directly, but these corporate entities rarely budge. So I either pay or move." "I'm afraid so." He looked genuinely sympathetic. "Have you considered buying something? With the proceeds from the bakery, you could afford a nice condo in the area. At these prices? Even with what I got for the bakery, I'd be stretching myself thin." I shook my head, and I'd still need somewhere to live during the buying process. Victor was silent for a moment, tapping his pen against his desk. Then he sat up straighter. "Actually, there might be another option. It's a bit unconventional, but—" "I'm listening." "One of my clients is an investor who specializes in small apartment buildings. He often lets me know when something's coming on the market before it's publicly listed. Just yesterday, he mentioned a building on Maple Street that the owner wants to sell quickly due to some health issues." "Maple Street?" I frowned. "That's only 2 blocks from here." "Exactly. Nice neighborhood, similar to this one. 4-unit building, all currently rented. The numbers aren't bad. It would generate monthly income while giving you a place to live." Stared at him. "Victor, I'm a baker, not a landlord. I don't know the first thing about managing property." He waved his hand dismissively. "You managed a successful business for 30 years. Being a landlord is much simpler, especially with such a small building. And you could always hire a management company for the day-to-day if you wanted." "Don't know." I hesitated. The idea was tempting but terrifying. "Just look at the property. That's all I'm suggesting. If it's not for you, no harm done." He scribbled an address on a slip of paper. "Open house tomorrow at noon. I'll let my client know you might stop by." I took the paper, folding it carefully, and slipping it into my purse. "Thank you, Victor. I'll think about it. That's all I ask." He stood to show me out. "And Ruth? Remember, sometimes the best defense is a good offense." The next day found me standing outside a modest 4-story brownstone on Maple Street. It wasn't fancy, but it was well maintained, with window boxes showing the first spring flowers and a freshly painted front door. I hesitated on the sidewalk, feeling out of my depth. What did I know about buying a building? "Mrs. Bernard?" A woman approached, hand extended. "I'm Diana Chen, the listing agent. Victor Ramirez mentioned you might be stopping by." I shook her hand. "Just looking, really. I don't know anything about investment properties." She smiled reassuringly. "Let me show you around first, then we can discuss the numbers if you're interested." The tour took nearly an hour. The building had 4 spacious 2-bedroom apartments, one on each floor. The ground floor unit had a small private garden in back. The top floor had access to a roof deck with views of the city skyline. All units were currently occupied with long-term tenants paying below market rents. "The current owner has been very generous with his tenants," Diana explained as we stood in the empty hallway. "He's owned the building for 30 years and hasn't raised rents much, even as the neighborhood has changed. That's actually a selling point for the right buyer. There's significant upside potential in the rents." "Meaning the new owner could raise them," I said flatly. Diana had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "Well, yes, the current rents are about 30% below market value. A new owner could gradually bring them up to standard rates," I thought. About my own situation. the 40% increase hanging over my head. And what happens to the current tenants? That would be up to the new owner, she said carefully. Some investors prefer to keep reliable long-term tenants, even at lower rates. Others prioritize maximizing returns. We ended up in what had once been the building's basement, but had been converted into a cozy one-bedroom apartment with a separate entrance. The previous owner used this as his own unit when he was in the city. It's not officially part of the rental inventory, but it could be converted to generate additional income. I walked through the small space, noting the updated kitchen, the exposed brick walls, the surprisingly bright windows that looked out onto a small courtyard. It was charming in its way, smaller than my current apartment, but with character. "What's the asking price?" I finally asked as we returned to the main hallway. Diana handed me a folder. "All the information is in here, including current rental, income, expenses, and projected returns. The asking price is $1.8 million. I nearly choked. It was more than what I'd sold the bakery for, though not by much. But still, the idea of spending almost everything I had on a building seemed ludicrous. "That's definitely out of my range," I said, handing the folder back. "Maybe not," Diana countered, refusing to take the folder. "Look at the numbers first. With your down payment from the bakery sale, you'd only need to finance a small portion. The rental income would more than cover the mortgage payment and expenses, and you'd have a place to live rent-free." I hesitated. "How do you know about the bakery?" She smiled apologetically. "Victor mentioned you'd recently sold your business." "I hope that's not overstepping." I sighed, tucking the folder into my bag. "I'll look at the numbers, but I'm not making any promises. That's all I ask." She handed me her card. "Call me if you have questions. The owner is motivated to sell quickly, so there's room for negotiation on the price." As I walked home, my mind was spinning. Buy an apartment building? Become a landlord? It seemed absurd. And yet, there was something appealing about the idea. Taking control of my situation, rather than being at the mercy of corporate landlords. Creating stability not just for myself, but potentially for the other tenants as well. By the time I reached my apartment, I had nearly talked myself out of the idea. Then I saw the rent increase notice still sitting on my kitchen table, and something shifted inside me. I'd spent my whole life being practical, cautious, responsible. Maybe it was time for a calculated risk. I pulled out the folder Diana had given me and began to study the numbers in earnest. The building was generating $12,000 monthly in rental income. Expenses, including taxes, insurance, and maintenance, ran about $4,000 per month. That left $8,000 in potential monthly cash flow. If I put $1.2 million down from the bakery sale and financed the remaining $600,000, my monthly mortgage payment would be around $3,500. Even accounting for vacancies and unexpected repairs, I'd still be bringing in more than enough to cover the mortgage and build up reserves. I could live in the basement unit rent-free, saving the $2,800 I was currently paying in rent. The building would essentially pay for itself while providing me with a home and a steady income stream in retirement. It was crazy. It was terrifying. It was exactly what I needed. Before I could talk myself out of it, I called Diana Chen. "I'd like to make an offer," I said, my heart pounding. "But I have one condition. The current tenants stay at their current rents for at least 2 years." "I can't guarantee the seller will agree to that," she warned. "Then I can't guarantee." "I'll buy his building," I countered, surprising myself with my firmness. "Those are my terms." 2 days later, after some negotiation, my offer was accepted at $1.7 million with the 2-year rent freeze for current tenants included in the contract. It all happened so fast it felt like a dream. The inspection, the mortgage approval, easier than expected thanks to my excellent credit and substantial down payment, the closing date set for just 4 weeks away. I didn't tell James about any of it. Our communication had dwindled to occasional texts about the grandchildren. with no mention of my living situation or his push for Oakwood Gardens. I told myself I was waiting until everything was finalized before sharing my plans. But truthfully, I was enjoying having something that was just mine, a decision made without input or judgment from my son and his wife. The night before the closing, I finally called James. "Can you come over tomorrow evening? There's something I need to discuss. With you. Is everything okay?" He sounded concerned. "Do you need help with something?" "Everything's fine," I assured him. "Just some news I'd like to share in person." "Okay." He hesitated. "Should Vanessa come too?" I thought about it for a moment. "Yes, I think that would be best." After I hung up, I walked through my apartment slowly, touching familiar surfaces, taking mental photographs of the space where I'd raised my son, loved my husband, built my life. Tomorrow, I'd sign the papers making me the owner of an apartment, building. The day after, I'd begin packing up 4 decades of memories. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. It was the beginning of a new chapter I never saw coming. What I didn't know then was that this chapter would come with its own unexpected twist, one that would fundamentally change my relationship with James in ways neither of us could have anticipated. The closing on the building went smoothly, unexpectedly so. I'd always imagined that buying property would be fraught with complications, especially at my age, but Victor had guided me through each step with patience and expertise. When I signed the final papers and the keys were placed in my palm, I felt a rush of emotions I hadn't experienced since I'd opened the bakery with Bernard all those years ago. Fear, exhilaration, and a surprising sense of power. "Congratulations, Mrs. Bernard. You're officially a property owner," Diana Chen said, shaking my hand across the table. "Please, call me Ruth," I replied, still staring at the keys. 4 brass keys on a simple ring, each one unlocking a different part of my new future. Victor clapped me on the shoulder. "You did good, Ruth. Bernard would be proud." I thought about my late husband, his cautious nature, his meticulous approach to every business decision. Would he have approved of this impulsive leap into real estate at 65? Probably not. But then again, Bernard had been gone for 10 years, and in that time, I'd learned that sometimes you had to make bold moves on your own. As I left the title company, I decided to walk past my new building, my building, before heading home to prepare for James and Vanessa's visit. The April afternoon was breezy but bright, cherry blossoms swirling in pink eddies along the sidewalk. When I reached Maple Street, I stopped across from the brownstone, looking up at the large windows and sturdy facade. It wasn't glamorous or luxurious, but it was solid, dependable, like me. Without really meaning to, I crossed the street and climbed the front steps. Using the master key, I let myself into the common hallway. The scent of lemon polish and old wood enveloped me, so different from the perpetual smell of yeast and sugar I'd lived with for decades. I stood silently, listening to the gentle creak of the old building settling, the muffled sounds of lives being lived behind closed doors, a television program, a child's laughter, the clatter of dishes. These were my tenants now. People I was responsible for, whose homes I controlled. The thought was both daunting and oddly satisfying. I made my way to the basement apartment, my new home, and unlocked the door. The space was empty but full of potential, with its exposed brick walls and gleaming hardwood floors. Smaller than my current place, yes, but with thoughtful touches that spoke of care. A breakfast nook nestled beneath a bay window, built-in bookshelves flanking the fireplace, a deep clawfoot tub in the bathroom. I could make this mine, I realized. Not just maintain it, but transform it. For the first time in years, I felt a stirring of the creative energy that had once driven me to experiment with new bread recipes and pastry techniques. Only now, that energy would be channeled into creating a home that was truly my own. Back in my old apartment, I spent the afternoon preparing dinner, a simple meal of roast chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, and the green beans with almonds that had always been James's favorite. Cooking had been my love language long before it became my profession, and even now, facing a difficult conversation with my son, I instinctively turned to food as a mediator. James and Vanessa arrived precisely at 6:30. I could tell immediately that Vanessa wasn't pleased to be there. Her smile was tight, her designer handbag clutched before her like a shield. "Something smells amazing," James said, kissing my cheek. He held out a bottle of wine. "I brought that Chardonnay you like." "Thank you, sweetheart." I took the bottle, gesturing them toward the living room. "Dinner's almost ready, but let's sit for a minute first. I have something to tell you both." They exchanged a glance, the kind married couples perfect over years of silent communication, before settling onto the sofa. I took the armchair opposite them, hands folded in my lap. "Mom, before you start," James said, "we want to apologize for how things went last time. We were pushy about Oakwood Gardens and we shouldn't have been." Vanessa nodded, though her expression remained guarded. "We only want what's best for you, Ruth." "I know that," I acknowledged, though I wasn't entirely sure it was true. "But as it happens, I've found my own solution to my housing situation." James leaned forward, brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "I bought a building." The words came out matter-of-factly, as if I were announcing I'd picked up milk at the corner store. The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. "You bought a building," James repeated slowly. "Like an entire building?" "A 4-unit apartment building on Maple Street," I confirmed. "I closed on it today. I'll be moving into the basement unit next week." Vanessa found her voice first. "With what money?" The bluntness of the question might have bothered me once, but I'd grown accustomed to my daughter-in-law's lack of tact. "With the money from selling the bakery, of course." "All of it?" James looked stunned. "Mom, that's your retirement fund, your safety net." "Not anymore," I said calmly. "Now it's my investment, one that will provide both housing and income for my retirement years." "But you don't know anything about property management," Vanessa protested. "The repairs, the tenant issues, the legal complexities. I ran a successful business for 30 years, I reminded her. "I think I can handle collecting rent checks and calling a plumber when needed." "It's not that simple," James insisted. "What if someone stops paying? What if there's a fire? What if—" "Then I'll deal with it," I cut in, my patience wearing thin. "Just like I've dealt with every other challenge in my life. Without any help, I might add." The words came out sharper than I'd intended, and I saw James recoil slightly. Vanessa's eyes narrowed, her lips pressing into a tight line. "So you've spent your entire retirement savings on some old building in a neighborhood that's barely holding on against gentrification," she summarized coldly. "And you didn't think to consult with anyone who might know more about real estate than a baker?" I felt heat rising to my face, but forced myself to remain calm. "I consulted with professionals, Vanessa. My attorney, a real estate agent, a mortgage banker, and a building inspector. They all thought it was a sound investment." "Your attorney?" James scoffed. "Victor Ramirez isn't exactly a financial advisor, Mom." "No, but he's honest, which is more than I can say for some people who've given me financial advice over the years." I gave Vanessa a pointed look, thinking of her father's attempt to undervalue my bakery. An uncomfortable silence fell. I stood up, smoothing my slacks. "Dinner's ready. Let's talk about something else, shall we? How are Emma and Lucas doing in school?" The meal was strained, conversation sticking to safe topics, the children's activities, an upcoming neighborhood festival, a mutual friend's retirement party. But I could feel the tension beneath every exchange, the unspoken judgments hovering in the air like smoke. As I served coffee and apple tart, James's childhood favorite, he finally circled back to the topic. "Mom, I'm sorry, but I'm really worried about this decision. It seems so impulsive, so unlike you. Maybe you don't know me as well as you think, I replied quietly. I've always been cautious, responsible, the steady one. But that doesn't mean I can't recognize a good opportunity when I see it. It's just such a huge risk, he persisted. What if it doesn't work out? Then I'll have made a mistake, I said simply. But it will have been my mistake to make. Vanessa set down her coffee cup with a sharp clink. It affects all of us, Ruth. If this goes badly and you lose everything, who do you think will have to take care of you? The question hung in the air, brutal in its directness. I turned to her, meeting her gaze squarely. No one will have to take care of me, Vanessa. I've never asked for help, and I don't intend to start now. That's not fair, James interjected. Family helps family. You know we'd never leave you stranded. I softened slightly at the genuine concern in his voice. I know that, sweetheart. But this isn't a reckless gamble. The building is fully occupied, in good condition, and the numbers make sense. The rental income will cover my mortgage and expenses with room to spare. But the work involved, he began, will give me purpose, I finished for him. Something to focus on now that I'm not baking every day. I reached for his hand across the table. I need this, James. I need to feel useful, independent. He squeezed my hand, though doubt still clouded his expression. I just wish you'd talk to us first. The way you talked to me before suggesting I move to Oakwood Gardens? I raised an eyebrow. James had the grace to look embarrassed. That was different. Was it? I challenged gently. Or did you simply assume you knew better than I did about my own life? Vanessa stood abruptly. We should go. It's getting late. And we have to relieve the babysitter. Her tone left no room for argument. As they prepared to leave, James pulled me into a tight hug. I just want you to be happy, Mom. I know, I whispered against his shoulder. But you have to let me figure out what that looks like for myself. After they left, I sat alone in my kitchen, wondering why victory felt so hollow. I'd made a bold move, secured my future, stood my ground against their doubts. So why did I feel so unsettled? Perhaps because I knew deep down that this was only the beginning of a new kind of struggle with my son and his wife. They might have accepted my decision for now, but their disapproval lingered like a bad taste. The next week passed in a whirlwind of packing, sorting, and saying goodbye to the apartment I'd called home for nearly 4 decades. It was bittersweet work, each object stirring memories as I decided what to keep, what to donate, what to pass along to James for the grandchildren. Bernard's old sweaters, still bearing the faint scent of his aftershave. James's childhood artwork, carefully preserved in plastic sleeves. Photo albums documenting birthdays, holidays, ordinary Sundays that seemed so precious now in retrospect. I was surprised by how emotional the process became. Not just sad, but cathartic. Like kneading bread dough, working through the heaviness until it became light and elastic with possibility. James helped with the actual moving day, hiring movers and supervising the loading of furniture while I made sure nothing was left behind. Vanessa was conspicuously absent, claiming a work emergency that couldn't be postponed. She really did have a client meeting, James insisted weakly when I raised an eyebrow at her excuse. Of course she did, I replied, not bothering to hide my skepticism. By evening, I was settled in my new home, furniture arranged, kitchen unpacked, bed made with fresh linens. James lingered after the movers left, helping me hang pictures and unpack books. It's cozy, he admitted as we finished setting up the small living room. Looks like you somehow. Is that a compliment? I teased. Definitely. He smiled, glancing around. I like the exposed brick, and those built-ins are perfect for your cookbook collection. I felt a surge of affection for him then, this grown man who still had moments of being my thoughtful, kind-hearted boy. Thank you for helping today. Of course. He hesitated, then added, "Have you met any of your tenants yet?" Just briefly. "The couple on the second floor, the Morellis. They've been here 20 years. And Mrs. Jenkins on the third floor brought me a houseplant as a welcome gift." I gestured to the small pothos sitting on the windowsill. "They seem like good people." "And the fourth tenant?" James pressed. "Haven't met them yet. Diana said it's a young professional who travels a lot for work." James nodded, though I could see concern still lingering in his eyes. "Listen, Mom, I've been thinking, maybe I could help you with this place. You know, maintenance issues, tenant communications, that sort of thing." "I appreciate that, but I can manage," I said firmly. "This is my project, my new beginning." "Right, of course." He looked around once more, then checked his watch. "I should get going. Vanessa will wonder where I am." After he left, I sat in my new living room, surrounded by familiar furniture in an unfamiliar space, feeling both exhausted and oddly energized. I'd done it, taken a leap of faith, started over at 65. I'd missed the old apartment, with its worn carpet and familiar creaks, but this place already felt like it could become home. Before going to bed, I climbed the stairs to the roof deck, wanting to see the city lights from my new vantage point. The night was clear, a half moon hanging above the skyline, stars barely visible through the urban glow. Below, Maple Street was quiet, only the occasional car passing by. I breathed deeply, letting the cool spring air fill my lungs. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt truly free. No more pre-dawn alarms, no more worrying about bread, proofing times or equipment failures, no more landlords threatening impossible rent increases. This building, this decision, was mine alone. Whatever came next, good or bad, would be on my terms. What I didn't know then, as I stood gazing at the city lights with a newfound sense of purpose, was how quickly those terms would be tested, and from the most unexpected direction. My first month as a landlord passed with surprising smoothness. I settled into a new routine, morning coffee in my breakfast nook, afternoons spent working in the small garden behind the building or addressing minor maintenance issues, evenings dedicated to catching up on all the reading I'd postponed for years. The rental income came in on time, with all 4 tenants paying by the 5th of the month as specified in their leases. I deposited the checks, paid the mortgage and insurance, and still had a comfortable cushion left over, exactly as I'd calculated. I'd met 3 of my tenants by now. The Morellis, an Italian couple in their 60s who'd been in the building for decades. Mrs. Jenkins, a retired librarian with a passion for African violets. And Marcus Chen, a medical equipment salesman who traveled most weekdays but played jazz saxophone in his apartment on weekends. The only tenant I hadn't encountered was the occupant of the 4th floor unit. According to the lease documents I'd inherited, the apartment was rented to a J. Whitman, who had moved in just 3 months earlier. The rent was always paid promptly via online banking, but despite my occasional knocks on the door, I'd never received a response. "Do you ever see the person in 4C?" I asked Mrs. Jenkins one day as I helped her carry groceries up the stairs. "Very rarely," she replied. "I think they work odd hours. Sometimes I hear movement late at night, but we've never actually met." I made a mental note to try again, not out of nosiness, but because I believed in knowing who lived in my building. The opportunity came sooner than expected. One Tuesday evening, as I was returning from dinner with a friend, I noticed someone entering the building just ahead of me. A tall man in an expensive-looking suit, carrying a leather briefcase. "Excuse me," I called, hurrying to catch the door before it closed. "Do you live here?" He turned, startled, and I nearly dropped my keys in shock. "Mom?" James stared at me, his expression a mixture of surprise and something else. Guilt? "James? What are you doing here?" He glanced around nervously. "I was just visiting a colleague." "In my building?" I frowned, confused. "Who?" It's not important, he said quickly. What are you doing here so late? I live here, remember? My confusion deepened. James, what's going on? Before he could answer, the door to 4C opened, and a sleek blonde figure appeared in the hallway. James? I thought I heard voices. Is everything okay? My blood ran cold as I recognized Vanessa's perfectly styled hair, her tailored work clothes. But what was she doing in my building, in an apartment rented to someone named Jay Whitman, and... Then it clicked. Jay Whitman, James Whitman. My son was the mysterious fourth-floor tenant. Would someone please explain what's happening here? I demanded, looking between them. James and Vanessa exchanged a panicked glance, and in that moment, I knew I'd stumbled onto something neither of them had wanted me to discover. Perhaps we should discuss this inside, Vanessa said finally, her voice tight with controlled tension. As I followed them into apartment 4C, I had the distinct feeling that my new beginning was about to become considerably more complicated than I'd anticipated. Apartment 4C was stunning, nothing like the other units in the building. Where my basement apartment had charm and character, this space had been completely renovated with sleek, modern finishes, open-concept living area, gleaming quartz countertops, stainless steel appliances, and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered panoramic views of the city skyline. You've been renovating, I said quietly, taking in the space that bore no resemblance to the modest apartment I'd been shown during my building tour. Without permission from the landlord. Mom, I can explain, James began, loosening his tie. Vanessa moved to the kitchen island, pouring herself a generous glass of wine without offering me one. We didn't know you were buying the building, Ruth. How could we have? That's not the point, I countered, still struggling to process what I was seeing. You've been living here? Both of you? What about your loft? What about Emma and Lucas? James ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of his father that it momentarily distracted me from my anger. The kids are at the loft with their nanny. We're not living here exactly. Then what exactly are you doing here? I demanded. Vanessa took a long sip of wine before answering. It's an investment property, and occasionally a place to work late or entertain clients. An investment property, I repeated flatly. In the building I just bought, under a false name. Not false, James corrected quickly. Whitman is Vanessa's maiden name. I used my first initial and her last name for privacy reasons. I stared at my son, feeling as though I was seeing him clearly for the first time in years. Privacy from whom? The poor neighbors who might discover that the wealthy architect and his corporate lawyer wife own a secret apartment in a working-class building? Or privacy from me? The flicker of guilt that crossed his face gave me my answer. How long have you been planning this? I asked, sinking onto one of their designer bar stools. James and Vanessa exchanged another of their silent communications before he answered. We bought this unit about 3 months ago. Bought? I blinked in confusion. This is a rental building. All the units are rentals. They were, Vanessa corrected, her professional demeanor returning now that the initial shock had passed. But the previous owner, Mr. Petrovich, was in financial trouble long before he sold the building. About 6 months ago, he began the process of converting the units to condominiums to sell them individually. He completed the conversion process for this unit, James added, but then his wife's health declined rapidly, and he decided to sell the entire building instead of continuing with the condo conversion. I struggled to process this information. So you own this unit, but the rest of the building was sold to me. And neither of you thought to mention this when I told you I was buying the building. We didn't know it was the same building until you gave us the address, James insisted. Maple Street has several apartment buildings. I fixed him with a skeptical look. And when you realized it was the same building, you still said nothing? James looked away, unable to meet my gaze. Vanessa, however, showed no such discomfort. We had no obligation to disclose our investment property to you, Ruth, she said crisply. Just as you apparently felt no obligation to consult us before sinking your retirement savings into real estate. The comparison stung, though I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of showing it. And the renovations? Did you have proper permits? Because any unpermitted work creates liability for the building owner, which is now me. Everything's above board, James assured me. I used my firm's contractors. All work was properly permitted and inspected. And Mr. Petrovich approved it? Of course, Vanessa replied smoothly. It's in our purchase agreement. We bought the unit as is with the right to renovate. I looked around the space again, noting the high-end fixtures, the custom cabinetry, the obvious expense that had gone into the transformation. This must have cost a fortune. How did you afford it? The question hung in the air for a moment too long. We've been saving, James said finally. For a second home? That's interesting, considering you told me you couldn't afford a bigger place for the children. I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. This isn't a home, Vanessa corrected. It's an investment. The neighborhood is changing rapidly. Property values here have increased 40% in the last 3 years. We plan to hold the unit for 2 years, then sell it at a significant profit. Gentrification, I said flatly. You're banking on gentrification, driving out the working families so you can sell to wealthy young professionals. It's called market economics, Ruth, Vanessa replied, her tone condescending. The neighborhood is improving. Improving for whom? I challenged. Not for the people who've lived here for decades and can no longer afford the rent increases. I thought of my own 40% rent hike that had driven me to buy the building in the first place. James seemed to sense my growing anger. Mom, I know this looks bad, but we didn't do anything wrong. We saw an investment opportunity and took it, just like you did with the building. There's a difference, I said quietly. I bought this building to secure my future and maintain affordable housing for the existing tenants. You bought that apartment to profit from the displacement of people like me. Vanessa rolled her eyes. Don't be so dramatic, Ruth. It's a business decision, not a moral crusade. I stood, suddenly exhausted by the conversation and the betrayal it represented. I think I'll go now. It's been quite an evening. Mom, wait, James called as I headed for the door. Are you going to try to evict us or something? The question stopped me cold. Evict you? From the apartment you own? I don't think that's possible, even if I wanted to. Right, of course. He looked relieved. It's just, the situation is a bit awkward now. A bit awkward, I repeated, unable to contain a bitter laugh. Yes, I suppose that's one way to put it. I opened the door, then paused. Just to be clear, Jay Whitman, do you intend to continue paying the monthly HOA fees to me for building maintenance and common area upkeep? Vanessa's eyes narrowed at my pointed use of their pseudonym. Of course we'll pay the fees. We're not trying to cheat you, Ruth. Good to know. I stepped into the hallway. And by the way, the building needs a new water heater. As an owner, you'll be responsible for 1/4 of the cost. I'll email you the quote tomorrow. With that parting shot, I closed the door and made my way back to my apartment, my mind spinning with questions and revelations. My own son had been secretly investing in the neighborhood I could barely afford to live in anymore. While pressuring me to move to a retirement community, he'd been renovating a luxury pied-à-terre that he never intended to tell me about. The betrayal cut deep, but beneath the hurt was something else, a growing resolve. James and Vanessa might own their unit, but I owned the rest of the building. And I was beginning to think that this unexpected arrangement might offer some opportunities of its own. The next morning, I called Victor Ramirez and asked him to meet me for coffee. When I explained the situation with James and Vanessa's condo, he let out a low whistle. That's quite the complication, he said, stirring sugar into his espresso. But not as unusual as you might think. Many older buildings in the city are in various stages of conversion from rentals to condos. Sometimes the process gets interrupted, resulting in mixed properties like yours. So legally, they do own their unit outright? If they have a deed and their purchase was properly recorded, yes. But as the building owner, you still have considerable influence. You control the common areas, the building systems, the exterior, maintenance. And if they want to sell in the future, the overall condition and management of the building will directly impact their property value. I nodded slowly, an idea taking shape. So we're stuck with each other, in a way. Their investment depends on my management, and my rental income includes their monthly fees. Exactly, Victor confirmed. It's a relationship of mutual dependence, whether they like it or not. And the other tenants? Could they be forced out if James and Vanessa somehow convince me to convert the rest of the building to condos? Victor's expression grew serious. Potentially, yes. That's the usual pattern with these conversions. Current tenants are given the option to purchase their units, usually at a slight discount, but most can't afford to buy. I thought of the Morellis, who'd lived in the building for 2 decades, and Mrs. Jenkins with her carefully tended African violets. I won't let that happen. Then don't sell and don't convert, Victor advised simply. As long as you own the building, you control its future. After our meeting, I walked home slowly, considering my options. The discovery of James and Vanessa's secret investment had shaken me, but it had also clarified something important. My decision to buy the building had been the right one, perhaps in ways I hadn't even realized. By owning the building, I could ensure that the Morellis, Mrs. Jenkins, and Marcus Chen wouldn't face the kind of displacement that had nearly happened to me. I could maintain reasonable rents and preserve a small corner of the neighborhood against the tide of gentrification that threatened to wash away decades of community history. And if my son and his wife wanted to profit from that same gentrification, well, they would have to do it under my watchful eye, playing by my rules. When I reached home, I found James waiting on the stoop, a paper bag from my favorite bakery in his hands. "Peace offering," he said, holding out the bag. "Cinnamon rolls. Still warm." I accepted the bag but didn't invite him in. "It's going to take more than pastries, James." "I know." He shoved his hands in his pockets, looking boyish despite his expensive suit. "I came to apologize. We should have told you about the apartment." "Yes, you should have." I sat on the stoop gesturing for him to join me. "But more than that, you should have been honest about why you were pushing me to sell my apartment and move to Oakwood Gardens." He had the grace to look ashamed. "It wasn't just about your apartment, Mom. We really did think Oakwood might be better for you, safer, easier to manage, while conveniently freeing up capital that might help you buy a bigger house," I added pointedly. He sighed. "There was some of that too, I admit. But not the way you think. We don't need your money, Mom. Between my firm and Vanessa's corporate work, we're doing very well." Well enough to buy a secret luxury apartment, apparently. "It was Vanessa's idea," he said quietly. "Her father has been investing in emerging neighborhoods for years. He suggested we do the same, told us it was a sure bet." "Harold Whitman," I mused. "The same man who tried to get me to sell my bakery to his developer friend for half its value. Interesting how that family always seems to know the best way to handle other people's assets." James winced. "Mom, it's not like that. They're just very focused on building wealth, on taking advantage of opportunities." "At whose expense?" I challenged. "Do you ever think about the people who can no longer afford to live in their own neighborhoods because of investors like Harold? And now, you?" He looked away, unable to meet my gaze. "It's complicated." "No, it's actually quite simple," I countered. "You either care about the impact your actions have on others, or you don't." We sat in silence for a moment, the spring sunshine warming, the stone steps beneath us. "I don't want to fight with you, Mom. James finally said. What's done is done. We both own pieces of this building now. The question is, where do we go from here? I opened the bag, the sweet scent of cinnamon and sugar temporarily transporting me back to my bakery days. Breaking a roll in half, I offered part to James. We start by remembering that we're family first and property owner second, I said as he accepted the pastry, and we make decisions accordingly. What kind of decisions? I dusted sugar from my fingers. For starters, no more talk of converting the rest of the building to condos. The other tenants stay, with reasonable rent increases only. He nodded. Slowly. That seems fair. What else? You and Vanessa can keep your investment property, but no more hiding behind fake names. The other tenants deserve to know who their neighbors are, even if you only visit occasionally. He looked less comfortable with this condition, but nodded again. All right. And the maintenance costs? Vanessa mentioned you need a new water heater. We'll split all major repairs proportionally, based on square footage. Your unit represents about 30% of the building's total area, so that's your share. That's actually more generous than I expected, he admitted. Vanessa thought you might try to make us pay more out of spite. I'm running a building, not a revenge scheme, I replied dryly. Though the thought did cross my mind. That earned a small smile. Anything else? I considered for a moment. Yes, Sunday dinners. Here, every week. With Emma and Lucas. Surprise flickered across his face. You want us to bring the kids to dinner every Sunday? Is that a problem? I raised an eyebrow. No, not at all. It's just, I thought you'd be too busy with the building. I'm running an apartment building, James, not a multinational corporation. I still have time for what matters. I brushed crumbs from my lap. Besides, my new kitchen needs breaking in, and who better to do that with than family? He studied me for a moment, then smiled, a genuine smile this time. You've changed, Mom. Since selling the bakery, you're different somehow. Not changed, I corrected. Just reverted to who I always was beneath all that flour and responsibility. It turns out there's quite a bit of life left in this old baker. I'm starting to see that. He stood, brushing off his suit pants. Sunday dinner, then. Should we bring anything? Just my grandchildren, and maybe some humility. He laughed, the tension between us finally beginning to ease. I'll work on that. Vanessa might take a bit longer. I've got time, I assured him. I'm not going anywhere. As I watched him walk away, I felt a curious mixture of emotions. Lingering hurt at the deception, cautious hope for reconciliation, and beneath it all, a bedrock certainty that I was exactly where I needed to be. My building, my rules, my new life, on my own terms. The weeks that followed brought a gradual establishment of new patterns and understandings. True to his word, James began bringing Emma and Lucas for Sunday dinners, though Vanessa only joined occasionally, claiming work commitments. On the building, management front, I discovered I had a knack for property maintenance that surprised everyone, including myself. Years of managing a bakery had taught me how to handle vendors, negotiate costs, and address problems before they became crises. I became friendly with an excellent local plumber, a reliable electrician, and a landscaper who kept our small garden blooming with seasonal colors. The Morellis, Mrs. Jenkins, and Marcus Chen quickly came to appreciate having an on-site owner who responded promptly to maintenance requests and didn't raise the rent at every opportunity. They even pitched in themselves. Mr. Morelli often fixed minor plumbing issues before I even knew about them. Mrs. Jenkins kept the hallways decorated with plants from her collection, and Marcus used his business trips to source unique replacement parts for our vintage radiators. As for apartment 4C, James and Vanessa's involvement with the building evolved in unexpected ways. At first, they visited only occasionally, clearly uncomfortable with their new visibility. But as the months passed, something shifted. James began stopping by my apartment for coffee on his way to work. Emma and Lucas begged to visit Grandma's building, even on non-Sunday evenings, enchanted by the roof deck where we set up a small telescope for stargazing. Even Vanessa mellowed slightly, though I suspected it had more to do with practical considerations than genuine warmth. After realizing that the building's value, and by extension, their condo's value, depended largely on my management, she became decidedly more cordial. "You've done wonders with the exterior landscaping," she commented one Sunday evening as we sat on the roof deck after dinner. "The curb appeal has definitely improved." "Thank you," I replied, choosing to take the compliment at face value rather than as a calculation of increased property value. "The Morellis have been helping me select plants that will thrive in our partial shade." "The Morellis," she repeated, swirling her wine thoughtfully. "They've lived here a long time, haven't they?" 20 years, I confirmed. "They raised their children here. Their daughter is a doctor now, and their son teaches high school mathematics." Vanessa nodded, a flicker of recognition crossing her face. Perhaps for the first time, she was seeing the other tenants as real people with lives and contributions, not just obstacles to investment return. 6 months after I bought the building, I received an unexpected visit from Diana Chen, the real estate agent who'd handled my purchase. "Ruth, you've done amazing things with this place," she exclaimed as I showed her around. "The building positively glows compared to when you bought it." "Nothing major," I demurred. "Just consistent maintenance and care." "That's the secret most investors miss," she said knowingly. "They focus on flashy renovations but neglect the fundamentals." She hesitated, then added, "That's actually why I'm here. I have a client who's very interested in purchasing this building. They're prepared to make an extremely generous offer." "I'm not selling," I replied without hesitation. "You haven't heard. The number," she pressed. "It's significantly above market value. You could double your investment in just 6 months." I smiled, thinking of the life I'd built in this building, the Sunday dinners with my grandchildren, the morning coffees with Mrs. Jenkins, the occasional jazz concerts from Marcus's apartment drifting through the courtyard on summer evenings. "It's not about the money, Diana. This isn't just an investment for me, it's my home. More than that, it's become a community." She looked disappointed, but not surprised. "I thought you might say that, but I had to try. My client was very insistent. After she left, I called James to tell him about the offer I'd declined." "You turned down double your investment without even discussing it with me?" he asked, sounding stunned. "It's my building," I reminded him. "I don't need your approval for my decisions, just as you didn't need mine for apartment 4C. "That's not," he began, then stopped himself. "You're right. I'm sorry. It's just, that's a lot of money to walk away from." "Money isn't everything, James. Some things are worth more than profit." There was a long pause before he responded. "You know, when you first told us you'd bought this building, I thought you'd lost your mind. I was sure you'd regret it, that you'd end up asking for help." "And now?" I prompted. "Now I think it might be the wisest thing you've ever done," he admitted. "You seem happier than I've seen you in years. More alive somehow." "That's because I am," I told him. "For 30 years I poured everything into that bakery, into raising you, into being what everyone needed me to be. Now I'm finally figuring out who I am when I'm just being myself." "And who is that?" he asked. Curiosity evident in his voice. I thought about it for a moment. "A woman who knows her own worth, who isn't afraid to take chances or stand her ground, who values community over profit, who still has plenty to offer the world." "I like her," James said softly. "I wish I'd known her sooner." "She was always there," I replied, just waiting for the right moment to emerge. As I hung up the phone, I looked around my cozy apartment with its exposed brick walls and morning sunlight filtering through the bay window. Outside, I could hear Mr. Morelli singing an Italian love song as he pruned the roses in our small garden. Mrs. Jenkins would be down soon to water her contribution to our communal space, a thriving herb garden that we all shared for cooking. Later, I would check on a loose railing on the second-floor landing, review applications for Marcus's apartment — he was being transferred to Chicago — and finish planning the building's first summer barbecue in the courtyard. My son had kicked me out of his life when I sold my shop, thinking I had nothing left to offer. He never imagined I'd end up owning the building he secretly invested in, never dreamed I'd find a new purpose that would bring us all together in unexpected ways. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living well, on your own terms, surrounded by the community you've built. And sometimes the most valuable thing you can own isn't property, but the wisdom to know what truly matters. As I headed upstairs to start my day as the building's owner, caretaker, and heart, I couldn't help but smile at the irony. In trying to push me toward a diminished future, James and Vanessa had inadvertently helped me discover a far richer one than any of us could have imagined. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these